I saw one that'll go down. Yeah, you have to go on down.
Is that right? And he said, yeah, I had sold with it.
Those ball games a lot of times. Prentice Lewis is on your boy staff now. Yeah, Tom Taylor.
Okay.
Testing. 1, 2, 9, 10. Okay? One, two, three.
Not now.
Now, Mr. Knight.
1, 2, 3, 4. Try that. Order. I'd like to ask you all to stand and ask Brother Mayor and Ingram to give us an invocation, please. We certainly appreciate the turnout for our meeting here this morning. We have a number of visitors with us today that are not members of the trade union movement, but they are friends of ours. We thought it would be a good idea to ask them to come out and sit in our conference and listen to some of the problems that we have. Maybe later on down the road someplace they might be of some assistance to us. We have a number of visitors from Mississippi State University and from the University of Mississippi. Would you please stand and let the people take a look at you? Professor Don Mosley. Professor Don Mosley and some of his associates out of Mississippi State. Where's Ransom Jones? He's representing Ole Miss this morning. He's had to go down and get up some recruits, I think, to kind of balance the situation out. He found out that he was outnumbered by the state delegation this morning. We do appreciate the fact that you could come over and be with us. We've called this conference primarily for the benefit of those of you that actually do organizing work in the field. But the conference has not been limited to those people. We felt it would be a good idea to invite the officers of our central bodies, organizing committee members of local unions that are interested in organizing problems as well. But the conference is primarily called for international representatives that actually do organizing in the field. We have probably had more success in the field of organizing in the past year than any comparable period probably since 1946 as we view it. Yet by the same token, we've seen an awful lot of campaigns defeated, and recent months primarily because the employers have developed new techniques in the field. Those of you that are present this morning can testify to what I'm talking about. Several years ago, we called a similar conference and asked our people to come in to review techniques used by employers in defeating our organizational efforts. We felt that by following this practice, by getting our people together and sharing in our experiences, that possibly we might avoid some mistakes down the road in future campaigns, and that's what we're trying to do here this morning. We have with us the director of the FLCIO and the assistant regional director of the FLCIO out of the New Orleans office. Brother Starnes, as you know, is over here with us, assistant director. We've asked them to help us sponsor this conference today. And at this point, we want to call on Regional Director E.H. Williams for a few remarks on the subject of organizing problems in Mississippi. Brother Williams.
Brother Ramsey and representatives from our international unions and our visitors and guests, I consider this a very rare privilege to have the opportunity to come to Mississippi and take part in a conference sponsored by the State Labor Council here, Brother Ramsey and his associates, primarily to discuss organization. We that are engaged in the organizing business sometimes forget that a lot of our people are just really not familiar with all the problems that we have day by day. They become rather common problems. And I think it's very good if we can have meetings of this type and discuss the problem of organization, which, after all, is the big job of the trade union movement, the number one job. I don't think we can do too much work in the field of organization. Our department in Washington is well aware of the problems that we have throughout the country. They're also aware of the peculiar problems that we have in certain sections of the country. About for the last 2 months, we've been holding area meetings throughout the United States with the directors in the various regions throughout the country. And for the purpose of working out some sort of way to get the various people, like this meeting is here today in Mississippi, from the regional areas. We have 3 or 4 regions joined together in the various sections of the country. That program is designed to hold meetings after the first of the year in these particular regions in order to try to find out more about the problems in the various regions. Ironically enough, sometimes people think maybe we have the worst climate there is in the organizational field, but we find in most parts of the country all of us have the same kind of problem when it comes to organizing people. We do have other problems that interferes. We have various states and in various sections of the country. But when we get down to organizing, we have to meet it head on, and the problem is to get to the people who are working in these various plants and industries and service trades that are not organized, and to help them to understand the necessity of organization and how to go about it. In order to do that, we've got to know something about their own problems. Today we are, I think, as far back as I can remember, I guess we have less unemployment today than we've had in many, many years. I think we have a smaller percentage of unemployment in this country than we've had for at least as long as I can recall. We are very well aware of the fact today that the younger workers who've come into the work age since the last 10 years or 15 years have had wages that are higher, much higher than previous. So when you talk to workers today about organizing and talk about wages, at one time that I can recall in my years of experience, wages was a real big issue. People wanted to know, first of all, how much more money they could get through organization than they were getting. So we only had to tell them that we would try to help to negotiate wage contracts that would give them wage increases and other protections. But today we find that wages are not the basis on which we have to sell these people. There are other things as important, or probably more important today, to these people than wages. For instance, I think security is probably one of the most important problems that we could discuss with workers who are unorganized. Because it's one thing to have a job, and it's another thing to have security on the job. We find that our young workers are more concerned about security, grievance procedures, and all those things that we embody in our contracts than they are in the wage structure, because they do realize that once you have a union, there is a possibility always of increasing wages, adjusting wages, getting security in contracts, pension plans, and all those things that we have in connection with labor contracts. But we do find, too, that we have still the old problem that we've always had, the resistance from employers. We find today that we have just as much resistance, or maybe more, than we've had in the past. And I think that it's our job to meet the challenge, whatever it is. Employers, of course, have pretty good organizations themselves. They have counsel, labor relations people, and they pretty well work together. They have a very good program of resistance, and they have been able to make it pretty effective. But I think the reason for it is that we have not had the local support in the various areas that we have to organize necessary to overcome the resistance the employer builds up through chambers of commerce and the elected officials of the various communities, where particularly this part of the country has been engaged in the last few years in trying to get industry at any cost. And the least they talk about, the least thing they mention, is the wage standards. And after all, what is the purpose of having industry in our communities? We're all for it. We want industry, primarily because of the payroll. Now, if we're not going to pay any attention to the wages that are paid these workers, then I think, and I think it has happened, that in place of being an asset to the community, in many cases it becomes a liability to the community. Because underpaid workers certainly cannot be an asset to a community. If the people who are not working in our industries are not making a decent standard of living, if they're not making enough money to be good citizens, to meet the responsibility of good citizenship, then certainly they're not an asset to our community. So our problem has been to sell the people. You might say it's a public relations problem, and I think it has to be. And it's a problem, an educational program that should be carried on among our local people. Because organizers, for the most part, my international unions, from our staff, are people who work at the business, and many times they're not citizens of communities where they work. Sometimes they're not actually citizens of the state, they're not voters of the state, and they're not familiar with the people locally, they don't know all the people. And the secret to organization would have to be that the organizer or the people responsible for carrying on an organizational campaign has to have the confidence of the people they're trying to work with. Now, if we're unable to establish confidence and unable to keep things in position to where these people can feel free to talk to the people who can give them information and help, then we don't make a success. So we feel, and I certainly feel, and have all of my life, in my years of experience in organizing people, the first thing is to get the local union organizations in the community together and get their help. Volunteer help is the best help we could ever have in organizational campaigns. Today it seems that the most of our unions locally feel that somebody else's job to come in and organize the people in their communities. We cannot do that without the help of the people locally. So I think the big job that we have to do, if we're going to be successful in organizing the many thousands of workers that are now employed in our various sections, is to arouse the trade union movement to the point to where our local unions and our central bodies, our state councils, will give the help, support necessary to overcome these problems that it seems it's almost impossible to overcome at the present time because of the resistance we have in our various communities. So for that reason, I think this sort of program by our state council and even by our central bodies is badly needed. And I'm sure that these are the kind of things that we'll talk about in our meetings to be held at the beginning, shortly after the beginning of next year in the various sections. We too would like to know some of the peculiar problems that we have in our various communities, and they're not alike everywhere. So another reason why I think this meeting can be helpful to us as well as to many of you, because you can't overlook the fact that there are peculiar problems in each community. And we must find a way to overcome the resistance as far as workers are concerned. And I think in order to meet this problem, we've got to forget other things that might be of interest to some of us and think about our own particular business, the business of organizing workers, in order to bring the wage standards up and to give to these people a better chance of a livelihood that they're entitled to. We believe this is most important. And we think it's one of the most important things that the trade union movement has in its agenda is to see to it that the people who are working today have the right and have the opportunity to join our unions and to get the standards of wages that we feel the workers of America are entitled to. It's true, I think, that nobody would hardly deny today that the trade union movement in this country has been successful. Today, I am sure that we can say without the fear of contradiction that the American worker has the finest living standard, the best wages and conditions of work of any workers in the world. We have gone a long way in the last 20 years. We have a very large, substantial, influential organization. And I think the reason that the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organization has made the progress that they've made in the last 20 years, 30, is because they have continually recognized, along with the growth of the organization, the influence goes a very definite responsibility to all the people of this country. And I think we have accepted and I think we have carried out our responsibilities as a trade union movement. We have recognized the need for certain legislation, the National Congress, and in our various states. We have set up the departments and the AFL-CIO to cope with those necessary programs. And it reaches out into the lives of all of the people in our community. The things that we do and the legislation that we support is not necessarily, and in many cases not, particularly helpful to the trade union movement. But it is helpful to working people and to all the people in the country. For instance, minimum wage laws. the minimum wage law that we have on the statute books of the country today does not affect particularly any members of our unions at all, because for the most part, the members of our trade union movement are getting far more than the minimum wage laws. And certainly if we wanted to be selfish, we would recognize, and we do recognize, that when minimum wage laws are passed, it has a tendency to retard organization in various plants where the wages are low. Because invariably the employer lets the people think in no uncertain terms that he's become all of a sudden big-hearted and has decided to raise the wages. Many of the people getting the minimum wage rates today are getting more wages than they ever got in their life before. And so they feel pretty satisfied, and it's hard to get them to understand that they're getting the increase in wages because of the efforts of the AFL-CIO in Washington, and because of the help we get from the people in the Congress that we have helped to elect. They know they're getting more money, and they know the employers continuing on their back, trying to sell them against any trade unions interfering with this business of ours. Foreigners from some other parts of the country coming in to interfere with a happy family. They have all kinds of gimmicks, moving pictures that are fakes. We have one that goes on continually. We thought it was over. But we found out recently employers have no look to bet. They use this old gimmick, women must weep, a picture that was made by a certain big corporation in this country, hiring actors to put on a pretty good show, where a labor union had a strike, big bunch of huskies, turned over automobiles, done all that sort of thing, and the gimmick was it shot a baby. Somebody shot a baby in a trailer. Thing was showed every time you had an election, NLRB election, the women must weep was showed. So bad he'd make me mad, and I'm hard to make mad. So we had to look at that thing, and you know what we found out? There never was anything happened at the place where the strike was supposed to have been carried on, except the strike of women. Women. Not a single man worked the plant. And all of this show was men, tough boys, you know. You'll see the picture. I think Ramsey has it. So we began to check, and we found out that this thing was made, and found out where the plant was and what union it was, machinist union. So we run a correction. We made a film correcting that. And actually, the chief of police, the mayor of the city, and all the responsible people of the community took part in this corrected film and testified without question that there was not any violence at all in this strike at this particular place. The strike was called because the company refused to settle grievances. There was no violence whatever during the time this baby happened to be shot. And after a long time, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the secretary, the husband, the father of the child was in the show. It'll be the corrected show, you'll see it, corrected film. He and his wife is separated at the present time. The baby never died. And his wife is now married to the boss of that plant. So I got my own ideas about what happened. But now this sort of thing is plain and simple the wrong kind of thing in this country. And I believe in being honest about it. If it hurts, all right. If it don't, feel better. But you know, I just don't believe in subterfuges and things of this kind. Now, since the thing become exposed to the, with it being a fake, I thought they'd quit showing this thing, actually. But lo and behold, last week I found out we'd had some problems with the plant somehow or another. The people didn't want to talk to our people at all. They just shut the door and we'd go around the places. We just couldn't get in. We know they ought to have a union, good union town. So finally we found out they had a regular schedule of showing this film in the plant every once in a while. No campaign, nothing. But they're doing this to let the people know how bad these unions are and what happens. You kill babies and everything else. So they got a gimmick there. They show it before there's a campaign. So if you have a campaign lose, you can't have another election on the film because we didn't know it even shown. But we found it out. So these are kind of things we have to meet, and I don't know why. I'll never know why. The employers of this country would go so far as to try to mislead or browbeat the people in their effort to try to form themselves a trade union, because without trade unions in this country and without the free bargaining, collective bargaining that we have the right to do in this country and to carry on a free trade union movement, like free people should, that's what's made the country great. Now, why would these employers go as far as they go today to try to prevent those employees from having an opportunity to have themselves a union that does have responsibility? And I'd say that we don't have one single international union affiliated with AFL-CIO that isn't a responsible organization. And these trade unions, these international unions, are like states. They are part of the national organization. And there we have responsibility. They talk about strikes that we call. All of these things are absolutely absurd. There's not going to be any strikes in any of our unions without the membership votes that. We all know that. And they have a pretty good reason. Nobody's more opposed to having strikes than the trade union movement. Nobody knows more about the hardships that we have to go through in having strikes. We do everything we possibly can to avoid strikes at all times. But we're certainly not going to give up the right to strike. And I think any day we did, we'd be just like the boys in Russia. Because the only difference between free people and slaves is the right to strike. What else do we have? Economic strength is the only strength we have to enforce the demands that we feel that we're entitled to with employers. And I think it works very well. And I think we should someday grow up and all agree that we're going to have trade unions. And let it be what it should be in this country. And I hope I live long enough to see the day when the employers in this country realize the necessity of not only supporting but actually helping to organize employees because it would be helpful to them. Now, I'm not saying that all employers, don't misunderstand, I've never said that all employers are bad. We have a lot of good ones. We have a lot of good relations. And I think that's something the public ought to know that you'll never hear about because there's not any news attached to it. The public hears about strikes you have. That's all. Nobody tells the public how many thousands of industries in this country that we've had good relations and good contracts over a period of many, many years. These things are not news, and people never knows about it without they go to some trouble to find out. But certainly I'd say that if the trade union movement wasn't the right kind of organization, if we couldn't justify it, we wouldn't have made the progress we've made. we have made progress. We've gone a long ways. We've got a long ways to go. We've got a lot of serious problems facing all of us today. We're living in a fast-changing world. The trade union movement's got to take definite positions on matters that affect not only themselves but the people of this country. And all the time these positions are not very popular in some cases, but we don't look back. We think our positions are sound. The policy of the AFL-CIO is established by a majority of people in conventions. And I think it's a good, sound policy. I think it's the proof of that we've been able to grow in prestige and membership and everything else in this country. We've opposed those things that we think are wrong. We're going to continue to oppose those things that are wrong. I think the labor movement can justify going into any of our communities, no matter where they are, and talk about organizing the people that are citizens and members of our community and helping them to get a better wage standard, better working conditions, to become more useful citizens. These are things that we're concerned with, and we don't believe the average person in our communities in Mississippi, if they really understood, could object to good, substantial trade unions being established in their communities. But I want to say again in closing that I think the main thing has to be that our local people in our central bodies and in our state council realize their responsibility as trade union members to cooperate with all of these officers of this state council, our central bodies, in carrying on the right type of programs, educational programs, community programs, and all these things it takes to sell the trade union movement and get into the organizational work of trying to help us to organize those people that are in your communities that are working that doesn't have the conditions they're entitled to have. We are perfectly willing at all times to assist in Mississippi, in Louisiana, and anywhere else in this country, because we have regional offices set up all over this country. Here we have 2 states in one region, and we're doing our very best to assist you and work with you in the organizational problems. You can count on us to work with you. There are a lot of problems here that affect you directly that are probably a little peculiar to maybe other places. Our assistant director, Brother Starnes, who has offices here with the state council and who works in Mississippi, is certainly familiar with many of these problems in our state. And Brother Ramsey has suggested that Brother Starnes and I lead off with a few remarks, and I'm sure that Brother Starnes will deal with the peculiar problems, many of them in the state of Louisiana, of Mississippi, which you people certainly I know are concerned about. So, Mr. Chairman, with these remarks, I want to express my deep appreciation for having a chance to be with you and to assure you that if there's anything we can do to help you in any way, the field of organization otherwise, I know that you know, you only have to call upon us. We have staff that does the organizing work, service work. We do everything we can to help the trade union movement. So, any of you people that feels that we can be helpful to you, I know all you have to do is to get a hold of Brother Starnes here, Brother Ramsey, or any of the people that connect with the trade union movement, and you'll find us ready to work with you. It's certainly been nice being with you, and thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Lige. I certainly want to advise those representatives present that if any time we can be of any assistance, don't hesitate to call on us. we are in a position now to do a much better job of cooperation in the field of organization than we have been in the past. We can put you in contact with members of local unions in areas where we don't have much organization as a result of our mailing system, etc. We've been able to put a number of our field representatives in contact with people in areas that, frankly, they didn't think we had the members in. So keep that in mind. I was in hopes today that we would have Johnny Ray with the furniture workers present, but I don't believe he's got here yet. I don't know whether Johnny's going to get here or not, but he has had 2 campaigns in recent months in northeast Mississippi that I think we can point to as some real landmark cases and where some real problems have developed in this matter of pre-election strategy on the part of employers. I think that before this session's over with, that we'll probably get into this matter of certification by the board without the second election. I've asked the attorney for communication workers to get into this when he gets up here this morning. The campaign in Pontotoc conducted by the furniture workers, I think probably, Bob, is one of the upholsterers. I'm sorry, upholsterer. I refer to them as the furniture workers. It's still a furniture organization. Campaign that was conducted by the upholsterers in Pontotoc, which was lost there a few weeks ago, I think is a good example, about as good as we can point to, as to the need of certification without the second election. In this particular situation, they had 85 or 90% of the workers signed up on authorization cards, and by the time that we had went to election, that majority had been destroyed, and the union had lost that campaign and lost that election by a sizable majority. And the Representative Ray has filed charges with the board, an 8-5 charge, which most of you people are familiar with. And if we can get a few certifications taking this route, then I think this is going to upset some of the strategy of the employers in these particular campaigns. Ray Smithhart with the rubber workers is present here this morning. Ray has lost the campaign along the same lines in Aberdeen, I believe it was, wasn't it, Ray? In Aberdeen. He also has 8-5 charges filed with the board. And before this session's over with, as a result of some of Bob's remarks and some of the remarks by some of the attorneys, we hope that you might learn something here in this particular area, especially when you're signing people up, when you're getting authorization cards signed, the need of stressing the fact that these people are selecting you as a bargaining agent, that you're not signing this card just to get an election. We want to get into this before this is over with. If you do this, if you've got the proper language on your cards, then I think that we might see some certifications after that majority has been destroyed. Now, Brother Williams touched on the film proposition, and we do have Women Weep again this morning. Some of you saw the film about 3 years ago. If you remember at that time, when we called the conference, this film had showed up in Mississippi, and every time we had an organizing campaign, about 3 days, and as a matter of fact, it was usually the night before the election, the Mississippi Manufacturers Association had secured that film. And they've got a real tight organization, believe you me. They're much better organized than we are. And every time we had a campaign going, and it looked like we couldn't lose it, they'd call a captive audience, call the wives out, and throw this film at them, usually over a piece of roast beef or something like this and some English peas. Well, this film just threw the women into hysterics. And never will forget an election we had in Pascagoula. One of the plants down there, I didn't think we could lose it. This was the All Workers Union. By George, when they got through with that film, we lost it. They destroyed the thing that night before the election. We've got that film this morning. We're going to show it to you this morning. Then we're going to show you the film developed by the Machinists Union, The Anatomy of a Lie, that's the answer to the film to show you what this was really all about. And we wanted you to see that film because the film is now being used again in campaigns throughout the state and elsewhere, being used in a different fashion from what it was about 3 years ago. We thought that when the board ruled on this thing, and they set a few elections aside and ruled these films off limits, so to speak, we thought we were over the hump with that, but it's not true. After studying the board's decision, there's some the attorneys will go into you with here today. We find out that the film is being used as soon as an organizer shows up on the scene. And as Brother Williams points out, in some cases, even you don't have to show. They just call them together and show them the film anyhow, in the case one might show up later on. But we wanted you to see that film, the answer to it, in order that you might be in a better position to deal with this issue when the occasion arose in a particular campaign that you might have going on. Now, we regret that some of you will have to see it the second time, but remember, it has been about 3 years since you saw it. And I believe that you might see some things here of interest even now. Now, Brother Starnes has been closely associated with, has assisted with a number of campaigns in the state and the last few years here. And he is very familiar with some of the things that we're talking about. I want to ask Bob to come up here now and to review with you some tactics that are being presently used by employers, and in some areas where we've actually lost an election as a result of this type of activity. Brother Storm? Let me, before Bob begins, did all of you get a copy of the program? Chairman Ramsey, Director Williams, other directors, staff representatives, business agents, friends, and guests. You know, being asked to talk a little bit on the subject which Claude outlined, and standing here thinking about the people who are in front of me and the experience that they have had, the varied experiences they have had in this state and in other states, for some reason puts me in mind of a little story about the little boy, about 4 years old, who had 2 older brothers. He was quite fond of them. He liked to listen to them talk. He liked to do everything that they did. So he heard them talking about the experiences that they had with their girlfriends and the dates that they were on. And as a result of that, he got his little red wagon out one morning and went trotting down the street, and he picked up a little neighbor girl and put her in the wagon and went to riding. Got halfway around the block, he says, "Honey, will you?" She says, "No." He said, "Get out." So went on a little further, and he found him another little girl, and he put her in the wagon. About a half a block, he said, "Baby, will you?" She said, "No." He said, "Get out." So a little bit further on, he picked up the third one. Rode her a little bit. He said, "Honey, will you?" She says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, my goodness, what do I do now?" So I'm kind of in that fix. What do I do now in view of all of this experience out here in front of me? But I might say in beginning that on the table, excuse me for pointing, over there is a scrapbook compiled by Brother Ray Smithhart, and half a dozen or so files taken out of our office in various campaigns which have been conducted in the state. The files contain propaganda used by the companies. And on our break, if any of you are interested in looking through those files, you go ahead.
You have company letters, company cartoons, and so on. Space didn't allow the display of a great number of newspapers, newspaper editorials, and advertisements. Now, what do we run into in campaigns? Well, first we run into opposition by a company. And what direction does that opposition usually take? Number one, company letters. And I'd like to read to you just 2 or 3 sentences out of a typical letter dated October 1, 1965, so you can see that it is recent, in a campaign in about the middle part of the state. Blah, 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 blah. We knew it was bound to happen, talking about the union representatives appearing. We knew it was bound to happen because you have good, steady work, providing you with good, steady income. And the union wants to get part of your money in dues very badly. This is the union's sole interest in you, nothing else. And I think somewhere along the line, some action should be taken against a company which puts out a letter of that kind, because in the first place, the company can't know what interest I have in an employee. And in the second interest, when the company makes a statement of that nature, the company is a liar. Reading a little bit further, the union would like to walk in with no opposition from us. We know that the union will not tell you all that you should know, and will misrepresent what they do tell you. Well, now, the company representative can't know what the union is going to do. That's in the first place. In the second place, the union representative is not going to misrepresent things. On further, the only guarantee against paying union dues and a strike is not to have a union. Well, that again is a lie. And I think companies have increased their use of misrepresentations and untruths substantially over the past few years. And they have done it, in my opinion, because of advice from attorneys who advise them to get right up on the edge of a knife blade, but don't fall off, and we'll get you out of trouble if you do. And if you do get in trouble, there's no penalty under the labor law. All the National Labor Relations Board will do to you is tap you on the wrist and say, don't do it again, and let's have another election. And that's one of the fallacies of this so-called law we have. So much for company letters. I'm going on right fast because most of you people are quite familiar with all of these things. The activity of company supervisors, for example, coming out when handbills are being distributed at entrances to the plant, putting ash cans up and telling people, put your leaflet in the ash can. Now, that activity by a supervisor has some weight. Company captive meetings, activity by the so-called civic groups in a town, the Chamber of Commerce, for one, Lions Club, etc., etc. The activity on the part of so-called civic leaders, the doctors, the lawyers, activity on the part of news media, televisions, radio, and newspapers, and I might say that televisions and radios have improved recently. Newspapers have not. Newspapers publish editorials, so-called, and I think somewhere along the line something's going to have to be done about the so-called freedom of the press, which we don't have. That's a myth, largely. Freedom of the press means the owner of the newspaper or the owners having the right to express their opinion in any fashion they choose, and a person whom they talk about or write about or print about has no recourse, and he can't even answer it. Now, those are just a few of the problems in that field we encounter. In another field, we have problems with the law enforcement officers, so-called. I mean the local officers in a town, the county officers, and on many occasions the state highway patrol. I don't know what we can do about that until we elect some so-called politicians who will be fair. Now, I want to throw out 2 or 3 things that I think could go a long way toward correcting some of the troubles that we have. And I'm not going to apologize for anything I have to say. I'll simply say that I know some of these ideas, a couple of them are pretty far-fetched. And I'm sure some in the legal profession will laugh, and some outside the legal profession might laugh. But I remind you that many cases have been upset after 100 years of standing by trying and trying and trying. And we're not going to do our job by just simply sitting down and saying nothing can be done. We've got to try something. Now, I'm going fast. One thing, forbid a company to hold a captive meeting. Require the company to furnish to the union the names, addresses, and classifications of all employees. Because the company is going to write them a letter, the union should have a right to reach them in the same fashion. The use of such movies as And Women Must Weep and others of the same kind should be cause for automatic certification of a union upon the union's request. Because the board has looked with a jaundiced eye at the use of that particular film, and if a company knows enough to know where to go to get that film to use, the company also knows what the board thinks about the use of it. And the company also knows that the film itself is based on a lie. And of course, the old cry that we've yelled for years, speed up board procedure. And some suggestions could be made as to how that can be done. When a union files charges, 81305, allow a union representative to be present when a union witness or a union prospective witness is being questioned by the board agent. Now, I have sent witnesses in to be interrogated by a board agent whom I knew had pertinent knowledge. And that board agent would be with that witness 3 minutes and dismiss it. The board agent did not get the information that that witness had. First place, we don't know whether that board agent is competent to gather the information. In the second place, we don't know whether he is inclined to gather the information. In some cases, I'm inclined to think they are not desirous of getting the information the union has. Now, the last thing that people are probably going to laugh at is when a newspaper publishes an editorial saying all of the things that they have said over the years about a union and about union representatives. When that newspaper will not give the union similar space in the same place, when that newspaper, as an example, will not take an advertisement, a paid advertisement from a union, then something should be done about it. I think the newspaper editor, when he decides he's going to run an editorial against a union in a union campaign, which is not any of his business, he don't work in the plant, he's not going to work in the plant, none of his people work in the plant, notice beforehand should be given to the union. A copy of his editorial should be furnished to the union, and the union be given the right to publish an answer side by side with his editorial when it runs. That's pretty drastic. And I know it. And I know it's a hell of a long time down the road before we'll ever come to it. But I think we ought to get on the road and start. And I hope I have outlined a few of the problems that we run into. I could add to that by generalizing the general atmosphere created in a town by the so-called civic leaders and the news media, which is hostile to a union all of the time, not just part of the time. As an example, and I expect 2 or 3 people in the room will smile when I come out with 1 or 2 of these, the atmosphere which prevails when a plant wants to locate a facility in a given community, and those people in the community find out that the plant has unions in other plants elsewhere, and the community then says, go to another town, go to another state, we don't want any old nasty unions brought into our community. And that has happened more than once. When, as happened a couple of months ago, not too far from here, one of the largest chemical manufacturers in America had taken options on several hundred acres of ground, was in the closest town to their option, talking to the Chamber of Commerce, talking about the type of facility they intended to build. And one of the smart boys on the chamber said, what kind of wages do you intend to pay when you come here? The answer was the same wages we pay in our other plants over the United States. And the Chamber of Commerce representative says, why, that's over $3 an hour. The answer was, that's right. Well, now, look, we don't have anything around here paying $3 an hour. We don't want anybody coming in here to pay $3 an hour, because when you do, it's going to make the labor we have unhappy. We're going to have to raise wages. We're not going to do it. We don't want you to pay that kind of money. And the representative of this company said, we don't allow anybody to tell us what wages we will pay. And here is our option. And he tore it up and he threw it on the table. He said, we'll go elsewhere. I might add parenthetically, since the state is spending $100,000 to pay salaries to people, to come down here and tell the people of Mississippi how they can get the same wages in Mississippi that are paid in other parts of this country, in the year 2000. They're going to wait until 2000 to get it. And they're going to pay $100,000 to get the information. And by God, if they'll come down here to the unions, we'll tell them how to get it a damn sight sooner than that. Thank you.
Tom, will you see if they got the coffee about ready? Is it ready? You going to answer it now? Thank you. Thank you, Bob, because Bob, he come up with some real revolutionary ideas here. I think he's just about as bad as some of these snake people that work around here with some of the civil rights groups. We're getting way off out here and left field on one equal time with some of these newspapers. I certainly agree with him, but this would certainly be most appropriate. And that probably the newspapers have probably done more to defeat organizing campaigns in the state than any place else. While he's getting the coffee ready, I want to touch just briefly on some of the things we have on the table that you'll find interesting. Some of you probably have actually been involved in some of the campaigns, but I want to call one thing to your attention. We do have with us this morning the Brother Kara with the Civil Rights Department of the FL-CIO. We've asked him to come over because we felt that before this session was over with that we'd get into this question of civil rights and union elections, etc., and thought we ought to have him here. Now, what we have in the state, in northeast Mississippi in particular, I want to point to this particular situation again. We had a meeting last night and we got into this thing. It's of the utmost importance, in my opinion, that we put ourselves in a position of being able to deal with the race question in organizing campaigns. In this particular county, the labor situation is such that we find the employers now are hiring largely Negro workers from the outlying areas. And a number of these plants, and a majority of the employees now are Negroes instead of whites. And we're going to have to deal with this. We asked Brother Carey to come over and when and if we got to this particular phase of the problem. Going back to the editor of the Tupelo Journal in northeast Mississippi. Mr. George McLean has probably been responsible for defeating more organizing campaigns in that particular part of the state than any individual that I can think of, at least him or some of his people up there writing the editorials. That particular newspaper spends about 90% of his editorial space in fighting organized labor and organizational efforts and things of this kind. The thing that I want to get across to you here is this: as far as this newspaper is concerned, they're very liberal on the race question. They're willing to settle the race question tomorrow, and he's done much to resolve it in that particular area of the state. Yet he's anti-labor. He spends much of his time in defeating our efforts in that particular section of the state. With you, when you get in one of these situations where you have a number of Negro employees, if you don't know anyone in the Negro community with influence, get on the telephone and call me and I'll see what can be done about it. Because these people are looking for leadership. They want the wages and conditions alleviated as far as the Negro people are concerned, and they really make the difference in a number of situations. We have some representatives here this morning from the Stark Line plant here in the city of Jackson. The largest, at one time, was the largest single unorganized plant in the state. I see Willie Hines in the audience, Joe Mullins, a lot of the staff people that worked on that campaign. The Carpenters Union filed a petition. As you recall, we talked about this 3 years ago at our meeting. At the time, it was at the White Hot stage. They filed a petition. The election was set aside after objections had been filed on activity. New election was set. This time around it was worse than it was the first time. Another election was set eventually. And finally, after 3 years, we had the third election and the union won the bargaining rights. The carpenters did. We have a number of those people present here in this meeting this morning that went through that campaign. And in this particular plan, at that particular time, the ratio was 60% white and 40% Negro. And now it's closer. As a matter of fact, there might be a majority of Negroes in that plant as a result of the labor shortage and the fact that they are now having to go out and bring in Negro employees. This doesn't apply all over, but in certain areas of the state, it's most important that we get the cooperation of the Negro leadership in order to win these campaigns. And again, I want to leave this thought with you. When you get into one of those particular situations, you don't know anyone, if you'll get in touch with us, we think we can put you in touch with the people who'll help you get the job in that particular community. Well, they got the coffee ready. We'll take a break now and try to be back about 10 o'clock and show you women weep. 11 o'clock, sorry, 11. At this point, we're supposed to have a question and answer session, or at least some discussion from the floor. And after talking with the next speaker, I think it'd probably be appropriate to put off the question and answer session at this time and ask him to make his presentation, because I'm sure that he's going to raise some questions. At least he'll raise some issues that will prompt some questions from the audience. So with your permission, we'll follow this procedure, keeping in mind if you have any questions that you want to raise in connections with the films that have been shown, please don't hesitate to raise them at that time. Now, according to the program, the printed program that you have, Mr. Tom Adair is listed to appear on the program. Mr. Adair is counsel for the Communications Workers of America. He called me a few days ago and advised me that he would not be able to come over himself, but that Mr. Al Horn, his associate, would come over and make an appearance on the program. Now, Mr. Horn has had quite a bit of experience and dealing with some of the problems that we've been discussing here this morning in organizing situations, especially he's had considerable experience in this employer activity prior to the filing of a petition, the thing that's really crucial at this particular point in organizing efforts. So at this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Mr. Al Horn, Associate Counsel for the Communication Workers of America out of Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Claude. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not actually counsel for the communication workers as such. Tom Adair in our law firm has been Southern counsel for CWA for many years. Actually, we are in private practice and we represent many other unions. CWA happens to be probably our single largest client. I didn't know exactly the nature of what I was supposed to talk about, so I'll just ramble away at will. I gather the thing you people are most concerned with and the thing you're most interested in are the problems that you're facing in your organizing drives. These are primarily problems having to do with the National Labor Relations Act and your contacts with the National Labor Relations Board. Actually, I was a Labor Board man myself one time, and one of the problems in dealing with the Labor Board is that the Labor Board personnel seem to think that Labor Board cases are a be-all and an end-all in themselves. I've heard Labor Board people say, well, we won. Of course, the union's dead and the body's bleeding on the floor, but they consider it a win because the employer is willing to post a notice or some such other silly remedy as that. One of the first things you have to get out of the habit of when you go into private practice is thinking that you win a case merely because you technically win a Labor Board case. You don't win a case till you get a contract, and a fairly good contract. And that's our purpose, and that's your purpose. Actually, when you start dealing in labor law, anybody, including lawyers, you feel confused and stupid and lawyers are the same way, except we get paid for feeling confused and stupid. The whole realm of labor law is a developing field. It is the volatile field of law. There's no more volatile field of law, including tax law, in our legal system. And that is primarily because it is a highly political field. And in part it depends on who won the last election, what the state of the law will be. That's the frank facts of life. We now have a reasonably favorable labor board in power in Washington, or sitting in the 5 seats. However, there are still a number of problems, and these problems have to exist because there are weaknesses in the Labor Relations Act. Some of the unions right now are sparking a drive to have a major look made at the labor laws, particularly the National Labor Relations Act, to see if some teeth cannot be put into the act so that employers cannot violate the law with impunity. We have had, in September, we had 2 days of hearings before the full House Labor Committee, and a subcommittee is supposed to be designated, and early in the next session we're going to be having hearings. Hopefully we will have some of them in the South and possibly here in Mississippi, in which we will examine particular cases illustrating flagrant employer abuse and show that even in cases where the labor board tried to do something, that the employer still thumbed his nose at the law and got away with it. We want to go into the details of those and present them in such a manner that it will impress enough congressmen to put some teeth into the law. Now, one of the problems I gather that you're facing here in Mississippi is something that really I haven't found it too much in other areas. This promiscuous use of women must weep just indiscriminately, whether there's a union campaign or not. We have been representing communication workers who are having several organizing drives over here, and we were called and told of this problem, and we were told that what was happening was that the company was destroying any possibility of acquiring a union majority before the union could even get in and organize. And they asked, what could we do? And when our clients asked us a question, they expected an answer. And all we could tell them was we didn't know what you could do, but we could try several things. The only thing I know of, really, to try is what we advise the communication workers to do. And I have a copy of a letter. Bill Stanley gave me the letter. I didn't have it with me, and he told me not to read the name of the company for fear some of you other organizers might go over and poach on his territory. But basically the idea is this. The Labor Board states that when you go into a campaign, nothing the employer does prior to the filing of the petition is grounds for setting aside an election if you lose the election. Of course, if you win the election, you don't give a hoot what he's done, as long as you can then get to him and get him to bargain with you properly. But of course, you have to consider at all times, and you have to have the insurance of what to do in case you lose. And one of the problems is, as you know, is that the employer gets busy. Actually, there are several areas of the law in which the Labor Board and the Labor Act rewards an efficient employer who gets real busy and busts up the union before it gets off the ground. And this is one of the areas where an efficient union-busting employer, if he gets real busy real quick, has an advantage. What we thought might work in the labor law is, as I say, is in a state of flux constantly. What we thought might work is when you get into a campaign and you realize the employer knows that you're in the community and the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, send him a registered letter, certified letter, advising him that you're organizing his employees, and then if you lose the election later and you want to use that as grounds for setting aside the election, conduct that occurred subsequent to your sending of the letter, I think there's a fair possibility that the Labor Board may shove back the operative date from the time of the filing of the petition to the time of your sending the letter. No one knows what the Labor Board is likely to do in such a situation. It makes good sense logically. Why should the employer, an efficient employer, have an advantage over one that just is a little slower getting started? And this is a letter that we wrote for this campaign that Bill is engaged in. As I say, I can't read you the name of the company, but it says, "Dear sirs, this is to advise you that the Communications Workers of America is presently engaged in organizing employees at your plant. However, this fact will come as no surprise to you, as it has been brought to our attention that you have presently informed your employees that you are aware of union activity in your plant. As you are no doubt aware, the National Labor Relations Act, as amended, guarantees your employees the right to form, join, or assist the Communication Workers of America, and so forth. Moreover, the law states that it shall be an unfair labor practice for an employer to interfere with, restrain, or coerce employees in the exercise of their rights to engage in union activity." And then skipping down. And it is for the above reasons that we were surprised when we learned that you had subjected your employees to the inflammatory movie film entitled "And Women Must Weep" on company time and property. This movie, which is filled with untruths and staged with professional actors, is in such a misrepresentation and so interferes with the employees' free choice that the National Labor Relations Board, in more than one case, has ruled that this movie was so objectionable that elections were ordered set aside because of its showing. And then we go on to discuss the film, sending a copy of this letter to the Labor Board in the regional office of the Labor Board in the appropriate regional office. I don't know whether this will work. I'm hopeful that it will, and I think possibly we could persuade the board in an appropriate case to move back the cutoff time, as I say. Actually, when I say nobody really knows, I think I speak the truth. Neither the employer nor the company knows, and one of your jobs as an effective union representative is to use your imagination to keep the employer off guard. Try new tricks. Try new devices. Any union organizer that goes into a campaign nowadays should demand from the employer equal access. Send him a registered letter telling him that if he addresses the employees on company time, you want the right to address them. If he puts notices on the bulletin board, anti-union notices, you want to have the right. You want a copy of his mailing list. Demand everything. You won't get it, but you might be able to use it later on if the Labor Board law moves in the direction that we're hopeful that it will. The board has presently pending, and I don't know whether, I heard a rumor that the decision has just come out, but I don't know. I was talking to Larry Gold from Washington, and he hasn't heard it, and he's much more privy to what's going on there. There is a possibility the Labor Board is going to come out very shortly with a decision which states that in certain proscribed circumstances, the union will have equal access. In other words, if the employer uses captive audience speeches under certain circumstances, we may have that right. But you need to demand such a right, I think, to protect your position to the maximum. Does somebody have a question back here? I thought I saw a hand go up. As I say, labor law is always developing. We have a joke among labor lawyers about the boy who went back to law school about 6 years after he graduated, and he went into his labor law class, and his professor was giving an exam, and he says, "What kind of questions you're asking them this year, Professor?" And the professor handed him a copy of the exam, and he looks at it, and he says, "Well, these are the same questions you gave us 6 years ago." The professor says, "Yeah, I know." He says, "Don't you know that we passed down the questions from year to year?" And the professor says, "Yeah, but we change the answers from year to year." And that's the truth. Management is complaining that the labor law has been changed. Actually, what has basically happened is we have now changed it back to the position of where it was before the Eisenhower Board changed it in the first place, wrongfully changed it. But there's still some more changes that are necessary. Actually, the old Wagner Act of hallowed days needs some strengthening. And this is one of the purposes, as I say, that the unions are sparking this drive to get a congressional investigation. We feel that if we can lay some dead bodies on the table, some real gory cases on the table, that we can convince some of those people that some effective law needs to be had. I think, in my own opinion, that getting more effective organizing laws on the book is more important even than the repeal of 14B. Because if we can organize the people in Mississippi and Alabama, we can repeal those laws on the state level. You don't have 14B in an area where unions are strong. Indiana was a deviant example, and in Indiana, as somebody's pointed out, they have now abolished the right-to-work law in that state. Even in Louisiana, labor was able to get right-to-work repealed. There they did it primarily, though, I think, by some skilled infighting on the political level rather than by force of public opinion. As I stated, I think one of the things that an organizer needs to do is use his imagination to think of new ways to keep the employer off guard, make demands, because when you make a demand on him, he is so conditioned by his labor advisors for him to consult them that at least you'll tie him up talking with his labor lawyers and keep him busy defending against what you're doing rather than thinking of ways to devil you. Don't just sit there and take what he gives you. Take the initiative. I've got here some excerpts which we presented to the House Committee, incidentally, of a labor consulting newsletter which comes out bi-monthly. It's published by Patrick Comer in Greensboro. He's a so-called management consultant. He brags that he's got about 19 states and Puerto Rico covered. And if you'll read these excerpts, you'll see many of the leaflets that you are thrown at you in these campaigns by the company. They quote each other. This fellow here quotes Granville Alley from Tampa quite frequently. As you people from the Florida area know, Granville is one of the biggest union busters down there. And they've got little things here. I just quote you just one, for example. In line with the problem you're having. This was issued way back in 1961. These are things that many employers in the South have in one way or another used the race issue in union campaigns. At present, this is legal, but the NLRB has announced that it is scrutinizing this practice closely. And then they tell you to beware that the Labor Board is likely to go the other way. They say, we bring these changes to your attention for 3 reasons. 1, don't rely on what you have learned in the past about admissible conduct during a union campaign. Secure the services of a good specialist in labor law when you are faced with union trouble. Keep yourself informed on changes in the field of labor relations. Your labor attorney can work with you more effectively if you are informed. And I would say that goes for unions too. You should keep in close contact with each other and get some of the advice that you can. We have excellent resources in Washington which analyze these management approaches and which tries to devise counterattacks. There's some excellent leaflets and propaganda sheets which we can use. The Textile Workers has an excellent one which they have used in the campaigns in the Carolinas against one particular labor attorney's clients. He always uses the same letters and the same approach. And they know about when these letters are coming out, so they have a fact sheet. They says his approach is unions are only interested in your dues, so they make that statement. And they say, yes, we are interested in your dues. And then they make a very intelligent exposition of why they're interested in your dues and why it's your self-interest to pay adequate dues, the employees to pay adequate dues to get union representation. And they handle these things 1, 2, 3. It's called the Textile Workers Fact Sheet. It's one of the best ones I've seen. And it has been very effective in at least a couple of campaigns I know of. And you probably, most of you, seen this Look Out Below, the little brochure showing the same thing in a general fashion without being directed at one particular management attorney. The second point that this labor sheet makes is keep your house in order and communicate to your employees about unions long before you are in trouble. Once your employees receive the kind of union propaganda that is enclosed, you will have lost the chance to say and do a great many things that you are perfectly free to do and say before the union begins to actively campaign. Now, this is exactly what we're being faced with here in Mississippi. Some employers are relying on such advice. And I think that in the case that we could bring where we have sent the employer a letter notifying that we're campaigning, we could cite such material as this, which is now in the committee reports, as justifying shoving back the cutoff point from the time of filing the election to the time of sending that letter. Now, these poop sheets are also filled with what I call the crabgrass theory. Don't let the union come into your neighbor's plant. Keep up the community sentiment. And how to do that. Whole things here in which they very cynically tell the employers how they can go right up to the line and maybe not cross over. And he keeps reiterating to do it before a petition is filed. Now, I just have one or two other things. I don't want to talk too long that I would like to bring to you from my experience in advising clients and organizing campaigns. The first thing, I would say union organizers as a whole have two major faults. One, they do not make notes and keep records. They rely on their memory or their sense of feel or the belief they'll be able to reconstruct things. And inevitably, when we get down to the situation of trying to prove it about 2 or 3 months later, they get all messed up. They can't get the facts straight. The labor board guy who's investigating the case thinks that they're making up some of it, and the thing is in a mess. Keep good records. You can't keep perfect records, but keep notes. Get signed statements from the employees, even if it's just a little snatch as to what went on, so that he can remember. He may not remember 2 or 3 months later, but if he sees he signed it, it'll prod his memory. When you talk with the labor board man, some of them you have a problem with as far as them allowing you to help your witnesses. I would try to be present, or at least in the general vicinity, and insist on being allowed to look at the statement before the statement's buttoned up and your witness signs it. Have your witness demand a copy of the statement. If necessary, carry carbon paper with you so that the labor board man can make a copy at the time. Sometimes they'll claim they can't make a copy. They're doing them in the field and they're writing them out by hand. You should have that copy immediately available to see if the labor board man incorporated all of the major items that you wanted incorporated. And that brings me to the second point, which is most union agents, particularly until they've been burned about 3 or 4 times, believe that every labor board agent is going to do the kind of job that they think he should do. You should operate on the presumption that the labor board man is going to do a miserable job until you know to the contrary, that he's going to be interested in washing out your case, getting rid of it the easiest way possible. That's not true with a lot of them, probably most of them. Most of them will do a reasonably adequate job, but there's a heck of a lot of them, as many of you know, who will not. And until you know better, you should operate on the presumption that he's not going to do a proper job, that he's only interested in getting rid of the case in the easiest fashion. Argue with him. You don't have to be discourteous. This goes not only for the investigation of unfair labor practices, but it goes for the disposition and the setting of representation cases. Don't let him set elections on days that you're not happy with. Make him give you the list of eligibles the day before so that it's not run into you 30 minutes before an election so you don't have a chance to adequately look it over. Tell him you're not going to put up with it. If necessary, go to your superior and get him to raise heck with the regional office. These regional offices are susceptible to criticism if it's proper criticism. Of course, you have to distinguish between the case where the labor board man is not doing an adequate job and the case where he just disagrees with you. But you can have an effect with the labor board if you're getting a raw deal. If you raise Cain at the right time, you can be effective. We had a lot of problems with the 10th Regional Office in Atlanta, and our law firm started collecting cases where they had clearly botched up and butchered cases. And we collected them for nearly a year until we had a whole big, thick sheaf of them. And we wrote out about a 40-page report on the 10th Regional Office, and we went up to Washington. We got the general counsels of several unions to go over with us and talk with the general counsel of the labor board. We got Barney Weeks over in Alabama to put the pressure on Lister Hill, whom everyone thought was the protector of the regional director of the Atlanta office. And the first thing you know, the Atlanta office is now one of the best regional offices in the southern area. There's still many incompetents and so forth over there, but at least they're trying. It can be done. It has to be done properly. You need to coordinate your efforts. And above all, don't just gripe because you've had a case dismissed. Analyze the case and see whether it's your fault or whether it's the labor board man's fault. I think with that, I'll I'll close unless you have any particular subjects that you'd like me to touch on, Paul.
No, sit down. Questions, I think. I suspect, well, I can understand now the reason John Levis thought it might be a good idea not to have him, a representative of his office on the program. He felt that the representatives in this meeting might be in a better position probably to criticize the board. So I think he just established the reason that John thought it might be a good idea not to come over. Bill, come back to you next, Ed.
About on these charges, what we should try to persuade the board man to do. 26th region, which covers the northern half of Mississippi. Apparently I'm not having trouble getting the board agents to give to the witnesses copies of their statements then and there. In the 15th region, we still can't get them. The board agents, some that they investigated back in June, still will not give the union witnesses copies of their statement. And just this past week, where we specifically requested for the board agent or those who are giving statements and to authorize the board to send me a copy of their statements, they would not do that. He did say that he would check with Levis about sending the witnesses a copy. What's our rights in this area?
Well, most regions will not send an outsider a copy of the statement directly. Now, this is done in some cases and depends on the person and depends on who you're asking. For example, if a manager of a company goes in with his lawyer and gives a statement, he says, send a copy to my lawyer. Normally they do because they realize that he knows what he's talking about. Where employees are involved, most regions are reluctant to send anyone other than the employee a copy of his letter. The employee has an absolute right, or I won't say an absolute right, he has almost an absolute right to have his statement. I can think of one instance when it was denied to an employee where it was obvious that he was only doing it under pressure of the company and that he was going to turn it over to the company. But normally the employee gets his statement. Sometimes the region insisted that it be a signed request for his statement. In other words, you have to send in a letter. But if they don't give him the statement right away, he should ask for it right on the spot. If they claim they can't make it, hand him a piece of carbon paper so he can make it at the time. If he doesn't do that, ask him to send it right away. If he doesn't send it right away, have your employee sign a little letter requesting a copy.
At this point, when we still haven't got them, you're saying that have that employee who originally requested it from the board agent now write a letter.
That's right. Just a little thing saying, please give me a copy of my statement in such and such case. Refer to the name of the employer.
I just wonder if anybody else is having that trouble with Levis's region.
I would have the same sort of trouble with back to have 5 or 6 witnesses to ask for a statement and then find a letter to the regional director and they were still turned down.
Is this Reynolds or Levis?
Levis, 15th region.
Well, if this keeps up, the best thing to do is for several of you to call the General Counsel in Washington, and they can make sure you got your facts straight and the things are clear. Don't rely on the employee statement that he sent a letter, for example. You see that he signs it and you put it in the letter and put it in the box, then you know that Levis has gotten it. Yes.
Let me interrupt just a minute. We've got a problem here. I'm not sure we're picking this thing up on the questions from the floor. When you got a question, I believe it'd be best if you came up here and stated it over the mic so we can get the record. Do you mind doing that?
This isn't exactly a question. It's to amplify what's been said with regard to the 15th region. I've had a similar experience where I gave a statement to a board agent and told him that I wanted a copy and was informed that it was not customary to give copies to anybody, and he would have to get the permission of the regional director before I could have a copy. There was quite a bit more to the argument from that point on, but that's inconsequential. I did get a copy of my statement, but the point is, it seems to be custom with the board not to give copies.
That's not so. It is the custom to the contrary to give copies, and this board agent is misinformed, and I think with a proper presentation to Washington, you could straighten out the 15th region on that. In fact, you could refuse to give a statement until they agree to give you a copy, and I don't believe they could dismiss your charge for lack of cooperation without raising a big furor.
Then when I refuse to give a statement, I may hurt my own case.
Well, they'll take your statement. I think you can force them. I think the best thing to do, if this is generally true of the 15th region, would be for the people who are affected by it to make a joint presentation to the General Counsel in Washington. He's very amenable to suggestions from the hinterland on things of this nature.
Wouldn't you think that this many people together, we've had a number of people here having the same experience, that it would be a good idea for them to get in a hotel room and draft a letter to this effect before they leave this conference?
It might be. I happened to be going to Washington in about 2 weeks, and I plan to see the General Counsel. I might mention to him. I hadn't been aware one of my clients back there is apparently affected by it, so I will take it on myself to at least mention it to him.
Emerson, Ed wanted to raise a question back there a few minutes ago. Ed, has yours been answered?
No, I just wanted to know if that stuff in Greensburg, if anybody was Hispanic.
I don't know who he would put on his list. He's quite proud of himself. We got this from a friendly management man. This selection that we have is published now in a congressional hearing volume, and the full thing could be had and probably should be published because it's very interesting. You get a real insight into how the management people thinks, and you also get, of course, all of the leaflets that you've been faced with. One leaflet here I thought was new, but I found it in this thing way back about 3 years ago. This leaflet, which some of you may be getting here, about the union member that got fined for not going to union meeting on Sunday. She wanted to go to church. Have y'all had that leaflet yet? That's all over the Carolinas, and that's big stuff, and it's having an effect with some people too. This woman supposedly up in Milwaukee someplace got fined because she wouldn't go to a union meeting on Sunday.
All right, Emerson.
Connection with the same one that Brother Starnes mentioned, I might add a little bit to that because it was over a case that I'm very familiar with. And for the rest of you that don't know, we happen to be very fortunate. One of the company men that testified changed his mind after giving the testimony and handed us the slip that the company gave him, or that the board agent gave him to give to the company. And we do have that. Brother Bob couldn't get one until he put on quite a little bit of pressure. But the man testifying for the company was given a copy and told to give it to the company. So if you have that trouble and are going to take and do something about it, you might look into that and see if your company witnesses haven't been given copies from the 15th District.
I did see here one point I meant to cover in my main talk, which is this problem of using the race issue. As you know, the Labor Board is now setting aside elections for at least abusive use of the race issue, and is even finding unfair labor practices where such is done. The new technique we find is for the employer to have someone else do his race baiting, either the newspapers or the local civic groups, or in several cases they have delegated employees and let them run around promiscuously raising the race hatred statements, using race hatred statements. In such cases, you of course have a problem of proving company agency. Where it's employees involved, one thing you might do is where your people are approached by such, have them go immediately to a supervisor and complain that so-and-so is doing such, so that management has it called to their attention. This would be particularly good if the company has a no solicitation rule applicable to union solicitation or union activities. Now, where newspapers and civic groups are involved, you have more of a problem. We have a case presently pending over in Georgia where the newspaper and civic groups in a little town masterminded the company's anti-union campaign we could not establish agency, although I'm sure it existed. It's just a matter of proof. But we did get the general counsel to issue a complaint under because of certain of the statements that were made by these groups, the civic group and the newspaper, on the grounds that it appeared to come from the company. It obviously must have originated with their cooperation, and their failure to repudiate constituted in effect a ratification and was an unfair labor practice. In this case, they were using pictures of the plant shut down up in Michigan. This was a runaway plant. Things of that nature. And as I say, you have to use your imagination to try to counter some of these things. We did talk the general counsel into issuing a complaint there. I don't know what'll come of that. One of the things that we're working on now is in a case where the employer engages in massive unfair labor practices before you can even acquire a card majority, is to talk the labor board into issuing an 8A5 bargaining order on what we call a but-for theory. But for the massive unfair labor practices, you would have acquired a majority. In other words, we say that the efficient union-busting employer should not get an advantage because he got busy real quick before the union could get a card majority, and therefore he's home free. There's a very respectable article in the November issue of Harvard Law Review of 100 pages which advocates this theory in detail, and it is now in the point where I think there's an intellectual ferment going on in labor board circles, and there's some chance that possibly this theory might be bought by the labor board. As of yet, they have not done that. The old way of proving an 8A5 requires you to have a majority of cards, a proper demand on the company, and then a destruction of your majority. The unions are pushing this type of case, this so-called 8A5, or they call it a Burnell foam type case. In my own opinion, it's an illusory proposition. I've tried several of these cases. I spent 12 days trying to prove 54 cards. The average union can't afford that many days of labor board hearings. It ties up one of their organizers or one of their staff people, or they have to hire a lawyer. And a company, a mean union-busting company with good legal advice, can make it very difficult, because the problem you've got of proving your majority is the problem you have in winning an election. You can't get your witnesses down there to testify they signed cards, or that they signed them knowing that it was for representation as distinguished solely for a labor board election. They have some real tricky technicalities here, and until the labor board does some more effective lawmaking or some projects itself further into the realistic field in this area, I don't think that these so-called Burnell foam 8A5s are going to be as much valued as we think. Of course, they're going to be good in some cases, and I'm not advocating dropping them, but I think that they're oversold. I've got one business agent now who's got 4 cases pending. As I was telling Claude, the oldest one is nearly 2 years old, I think about 18 months, and the newest one is about 9 months old, and he's still at least a year away from his first bargaining order. And he's getting discouraged with that. He was hot for this 8A5 theory at first, but he's getting cold on it now.
Mr. Long, I have a question. If you have the answer, I'd like to know. What do you recommend, or what can be done where you go to the entrance of a plant to put out handbills, where 2 people from the company comes out with trash cans, about the first dozen car takes handbills okay, management's looking at out the door, and they see these 2 ain't effective, they send 2 more thugs out there with hammers and wrenches and threaten whipping you and running you off. Of course, I didn't run. In fact, I'm getting a little old to run. But they get between you and the trash can and still threaten the people and tell them to throw it in the trash can, and they don't need it. Now, that made our distribution ineffective, and a lot of people was afraid to take them. What's the answer to that? How can we stop that interference?
Are these rank and file employees that are holding the trash can, are they supervisors?
Supervisors or department heads.
Supervisors, I think that would be the equivalent of interrogation, because in effect the employee is announcing his intention by whether or not he drops the leaflet or not, and I think it would be in effect a disguised form of interrogation. Now, where you'll have the problem is where they use rank and file employees, and you've got to show that the company's either sponsoring it or encouraging it or permitting it under such circumstances that they should not. In that case, the best thing to do is have some employee go up to the management, and this takes a employee with some guts, and complain that he doesn't like so-and-so down there on company time trying to make him throw away handbills, that he wants to read them, and he's not necessarily for the union, but he wants to read them. Then management's on notice of what's going on, and possibly you can say that in effect management knows, and therefore that is the same thing. It's equivalent to interrogation, because if the employee drops the handbill in the trash can, he's in effect voting for the company, or at least as far as the company is concerned. I think you've got to try what you can, and sometimes it depends on how much guts your people have, and how much guts you've got, to how much you dare and how much you can get away with.
Okay. On that one, he was asking that one of those fellows happened to be at the time a maintenance man who's now a department head, and he was getting paid for doing it. Since we may be paying you today, I want to ask you about this one, about the race question. This is in a little weekly newspaper that's read by everybody in the county, and it touches on race and a few other things, beatniks and so forth. Front page editorial, sign a card, lose your freedom. It doesn't take much imagination to figure out what the 140,000 American boys in Vietnam are saying about the members of the various civil rights groups back home who are marching and demonstrating in protest of the draft. Neither does it take much to figure out that every time a union member pays dues to his superiors, some of that money has been going to help finance such organizations as COFO, NAACP, CORE, SNCC. I don't know what's right. He left out SLIC this time. He's usually been putting SLIC in there, and all other similar groups. Most workers realize that pressure put on them to sign cards and join a union comes from a higher-up bosses in the union, and the workers don't have one thing to say about where and how their dues money is spent. Such places as Mount Beulah Project have profited well from connections with union bosses, and so long as such practices continue, we don't believe workers in this area will be pressured into supporting such activities. It's hard to figure out who takes the easy road and who exploits the working men and women after the jobs have been created by local efforts and money. How many times has a union worked and labored to create local jobs for our men and women? Have they ever put up their money to help get an industry to move into one of our communities? No. But do they wait until workers start producing for a company which provides them with everything a union can and more, and doesn't require them to pay dues to keep their jobs? The bosses of a union have demonstrated many times that they are not concerned with the individual man or woman who is trying to make a living for their families, but just the opposite. They use those same men and women, if they join a union, to further their own political activities, gain favor with minority groups, and swell the treasure of such bosses as Hoffa and Ruther. We don't believe there's a local businessman in this county who would want local workers to sign cards giving the union complete control of a man or woman in local plants, and neither do we believe that a union can provide any more benefits for those workers than the companies they are working for. It is not morally right for a worker to be forced to pay to keep his job, and that's what happens when a union is given authority to represent the workers with the company. Our contention is that the worker's got the job for himself in the first place, is on his own initiative and ability, and the union has no right to enter the picture and want part of workers' pay. Now, Al, this is typical of what appears every week in there, and they tie in the Selma marches, the student demonstrations on the campuses in California. Now, the workers, the only way we can tie company agency is that the workers in a captive audience hear this same kind of speech from the manager before it comes out in the paper on Wednesday. It's said a little different. Now, what's the answer to this kind of race?
One of the problems is, Bill...
Let me, before you answer that, go see the newspaper editor, have a long session with him. He did appreciate it. He says the first union man ever come see him except one who wanted to beat hell out of him, and who happened to be a CWA member a few years ago, and he admits then that he, as an editor of the paper, can take out after any citizen in that town and destroy him, right or wrong, and that's his right as an editor of the paper.
This is the same thing I think that Bob raised this morning, so maybe you've got the answer. It's been raised a second time.
Well, Actually, I get into this. I'm like Joe Rao, whom some of you may know as the general counsel for UAW in Washington. My civil liberties views conflict with my labor union views or civil rights views or other views. I'm a strong believer in the right even of a newspaper editor to say what he wants, Bill, as long as it's within certain bounds. And I would not deprive him of his right to issue that editorial. I think that you do and should have a right to respond. I think, for example, that you can go to him and try and talk him into publishing a letter to the editor or some corresponding response. I think you should have the right to put in an ad to answer those things that you consider untrue. And if he refuses to accept your ad, and enough of these instances occur, I think possibly the Congress could and would pass legislation. I think there's a possibility that you could get legislation requiring newspapers that affect commerce to publish non-defamatory ads on the same basis that it publishes any other commercial ads. I would not think that merely because the newspaper man is unfriendly that you should deprive the editor of his right to make such statements. I think he's wrong, I think he's stupid, and I think he's misguided. But he probably thinks the same thing of us. And that's the virtue of our system, I think.
I appreciate that. Letters to the editor don't work. I tried that in another campaign, and they drafted my committee. They're in Vietnam now. And the editor of a newspaper years ago told me, don't ever get in a fight with a newspaper editor in his own paper. He'll beat you to death.
Well, what would you advocate, Bill?
I don't know. Maybe like some of them going to beat hell out of him. But, I mean, is there the fact that members hear the same kind of speech, general speech, COFO, SNCC, Vietnam protest in the plant, in a captive audience, and then later on in the week they read it in the paper? Can that be tied in with agency?
Well, you might use such statements if they come out immediately before an election to set aside an election, because it doesn't matter who makes the statements. If they're coercive and they upset the free atmosphere of an election, as you know, particularly if they're immediately before the election, you can have elections set aside on what's stated in a newspaper. But to attribute agency to the newspaper, that it's acting for the employer, you've got to have some sort of a case. And as I say, I have loyalties and obligations which to me are as great or greater than my devotion to the union cause, and one of them is to free press, and one of them is the right to say what you want, because I don't want anybody stepping on my right to say what I want just because it happens to be something you don't like. And I don't think you really would want to deprive the people to think what they want of labor unions.
No. I don't mean to be arguing with him. We'll sit down and shut up, believe it or not. But what is happening here, and this is our problem in Mississippi as I view it, and I think there's some people out here who agree with me, these people, company and people in the community, are destroying our majority before it's ever established. They're destroying our opportunity to establish a majority.
Well, you've got probably here in Mississippi what you've got in some other states. There's an article in the last issue of Reporter magazine about this runaway industry, and it was directed to Tennessee, I believe, and it has a good analysis of what a fraud it is on the public and how stupid it really is of the people to promote and encourage this type of what some people call scum industry to come into the state, designed to exploit a low-wage situation and to contribute nothing. Here it is in the Reporter magazine. It's called The Air-Conditioned Sweatshop by Bill Kovac. I highly commend it to you. I'm sure you'll see some of the same things that have happened here in Mississippi in this article.
You're not quite through yet.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Bill, write this guy.
I'd like to make one little illustration about this talk of rights. Now, I have every right to swing my arm, but you see, my right to swing my arm stops where it meets your nose. Now, that's what's happening in these newspaper business. Now, I haven't heard anybody advocate doing away with freedom of the press. But if a man is going to have a right to call me every filthy name on the face of the earth, he either should do one of two things. He either should give me a chance to reply under exactly the same circumstances, or he should be held to account in the courts for this. And I'm sorry, it won't do any good, and that's all you can get in this state.
Well, actually, if he defames you within the legal meaning of the law, you do have access to the courts. Now, whether or not you get a jury to sustain a verdict, I don't know. That's a whole philosophical question that is troubling our whole area at this time. The second thing on the right of equal reply, newspapers are considered private industry and private property, although to many extents they are almost a monopoly. In most areas they are a monopoly. There's very few major cities now that have more than one newspaper or more than one controlling company. Now when you get into the question of radio and TV, which occupy airspace, and they have a franchise from the federal government, so to speak, to occupy that airspace, and they engage in such tactics, I think you can make a good case that you would have an equal right to reply, and a lot of them are getting very edgy about that. That's why they pulled in their horns. You're getting less and less of this flamboyant stuff on radio and TV because they're realizing that the Federal Communications Commission is going to make them give equal right to reply.
You're acquainted with the case we filed with FCC TV station in Jackson?
No, I didn't know that. I had one with the radio station that we...
We filed a protest with the FCC on renewal of the license. And I can assure you that station has cleaned its program enough. It's on probation at the present time.
I'll tell you one thing we did do with the newspaper. In fact, we did it to the same newspaper twice. The newspaper was using a special mailing rate that it got. It had a special mailing privilege in which I think 2 or 3 times a year it could mail out an edition at a very bargain mailing rate, and it used these 2 of these occasions to mail out an open and shut anti-union, union-busting edition. Didn't contain an item of news in it except on a particular union campaign. And we got the post office to make them pay the regular mailing rate, and it enraged the editor. He wrote an editorial in the next paper about it. But that was only a minor thing. It did make him mad. That's about the only advantage we got out of it.
If any of you are thinking of seeking any sort of relief in the courts in this state as far as libel and slander is concerned, I don't know the law in your state, but I can tell you what it is here. A man can call you anything he pleases, true or untrue, on the front page, and if he will issue an apology, you can get nothing else. Period. That is all you can get in this state. It happened to Claude Ramsey. If any of you are not familiar with the story, you ought to know. They insinuated and practically called the man a communist on the front page, and when he wrote them a letter and warned them that there was some action coming, they printed an apology about this high, way back in the back of the paper at the bottom of the sheet.
Well, of course, your problem is the old problem. What do you do about Mississippi? And it's not just labor that's having a problem. It's everybody that's having a problem, and your answer is political. But what we're trying to do is work within the framework, basically, of what's here and try to do what we can with what we've got. And you can't change the whole system single-handed. And I say that you've got a losing fight right now to try to do anything effectively with these newspapers. You can pick at them a little bit. I think you can devote your effort to other causes, and you're just going to have to suffer slanderous attacks to some extent in the newspapers and newspaper editorials, and just face that as a fact of life. The only way to change that is to organize and get so strong and get so effective that the newspaper begins to pay some attention to you.
I'd like to say on this question of the newspaper, small town business, that we've all had the experience, and I don't know this attorney here, but I know our general counsel, I've taken it up with him, and we haven't found any effective remedy, but we have in isolated cases, and I think it would be well for everybody connected with the labor movement in this state to give it some thought. We have, I remember several years ago in Alabama, southern part of Alabama, which is as bad as most any section in Mississippi as far as organized labor is concerned, we got us a box holder's permit, and we published a tabloid over there that went out once a month to everybody that lived in the county. We covered a 3-county area over there in conjunction with the Farmers Union organizing about 20 years ago in South Alabama. And I think that there are certain areas in this state, Lee County, for example, and some of the other places where there's heavy industrialization, that some of us and some of the unions ought to start thinking and working with the state council and putting out a monthly tabloid, and let's beat their brains out. We can get excerpts from the FL-CIO News and from international papers. We can get our own press releases here. The staff can bring in items of interest where they negotiate contracts and what they've done. And anytime you're putting out a paper in an area, if you talk about something close at home, the people will read it. If you publish something that happened in New York, they don't give a damn about it, or something that happened in Louisiana. If you talk about things that have happened in Lee County and the surrounding counties where labor has got wage increases for the people that never show up in their local papers, I think this is something that we can get workers to look forward to and put it out about once a month. And I don't think that the cost of it now with some of the printing equipment we got would be prohibitive. And I'd like to see it investigated by the officers of our council.
I don't think that was a question, but I think that's a good idea, because I think if we can get the facts to the people, while I don't say the labor movement is all right and we don't make mistakes, I think basically, particularly down in this area, as far as black and white goes, we're white and they're black, with no racial overtones to that statement.
Well, let me say there is another side to this. So when a racial question is injected into an organizing campaign, I happened to be in a meeting not too long ago where the majority of the employees were Negroes, and the debate at that time was which union was more infested with Klan activity. So this is the other side of the coin. When the majority of the workers are white people, then the Kofo-SNCC approach is there. But when you got a majority of Negro employees involved in the effort, then the stuff is that's thrown into the picture then is that this union is Klan infested, and if you're not careful, you're going to get in there with a bunch of Klansmen. That's the other side. Robinson with the ILA.
Speaking of decision handed down by the Labor Board, some time ago, attempt to organize a group of men working with the warehouse. These men were being employed by a contractor who contracts from the Port Authority. I petitioned the Labor Board for certification, and as a result of that, the Port Authority discontinued the contractor from doing the job. The Labor Board ruled that the unit no longer exists, so the case was lost. What would be the best step to take toward that?
I think I probably have to talk with you for about 30 or 40 minutes on that, because you hardly know what you can do. Sometimes you can't do anything. If the governmental agency is operating in connivance with an employer, you have a particular problem, because the Labor Board, being politically conscious, is very reluctant to tangle with a state or local government. I have had a case over in Mobile, Alabama, where for about 3 years we've had the company, there was several companies running into state court and getting injunctions against pure 100% peaceful picketing in cases of companies that are clearly covered by the Labor Board. We went to the Labor Board and got an advisory opinion, which you can now do under the Landrum-Griffin amendments, that this situation was covered by the Labor Relations Act. And the judge, he just looks at it and laughs, and the injunctions continued. We finally talked one of the 2 or 3 local judges who were involved in these injunction cases into agreeing that there was federal preemption and he should not enjoin peaceful picketing. And so he dissolved the injunction. The Supreme Court of Alabama reinstated the injunction pending appeal, and that case has been sitting there in the Supreme Court of Alabama for now 2 years in an open, well, I shouldn't say this, I'm an officer of the Alabama court, but anyway, we tried to talk the Labor Board into issuing a complaint that this fraudulent misuse of state processes was a violation of Section 8A1. We convinced some of the Labor Board people, but not all, to do it, and the primary reason they would not do it is they're just afraid to tangle with such an issue, the political implications, and they're afraid of the state's riders in Congress on such a matter.
I think it might be well to mention the fact that the next speaker will probably touch on this particular area of using the courts to remove peaceful picketing and that sort, et cetera. We have a building trades case. with the bill and trades carried up to the Supreme Court to establish this, the fact that the NLRB does preempt this field that you're talking about. Knox Walker will go into that in the next discussion period. Now, we about ready to serve coffee. What I think probably would be a good idea to do here is to have our coffee break, come back about 2:45, and then after Knox finishes his presentation, have another question and answer session, and let both of these lawyers field the questions, because I think there's going to be some duplication. Now, before we break for coffee, Ransom Jones from the University of Mississippi, who is active in the Young Democrats, has got an announcement he'd like to make. Now, I don't know who's eligible for Young Democrats here, but I can see a lot of old Democrats.
Here, some pamphlets to organize Young Democrats Club across the state of Mississippi. It's necessary that we do this if we're going to beat these, to quote Tom Knight, zeros that we have up there in the Congress now. That's unquote. So we'd like for everybody here to come by and pick up one of these pamphlets. And on the back of the pamphlet will be an address. This will be Mr. Silver's address. He's our executive secretary in the state. And we'd like for you to write to Bill to get information. Give these pamphlets to young people in your communities between the age of 16 and 40 and ask them to organize these groups across the state. We'd appreciate it. We have to get something started, to get some activity going in this state to beat these people that vote against 14B and increasing minimum wage and these other things. We'd appreciate your help on this.
Thank you, Ransom. Ransom is the fellow that I tried to introduce this morning. He was absent trying to get the Ole Miss faculty together, get them up to meeting. He found out he was outnumbered by the Mississippi State group, but he finally got him in the meeting. I believe they're here now, aren't they? I've just been recently, this morning was given a fact sheet on Ku Klux Klan activity, etc., published by the Anti-Defamation League. I got enough copies, I think, for everybody here to get one if you'd like to have this. I'll leave this on the table, and if you'd like to have a copy of it, come up and pick it up while we're having the coffee. We'll recess now and come back in about 15 minutes. Maybe it'll be a good opportunity to get it while we're